Greetings, puzzle lovers. As many of you may... Greetings, puzzle enthusiasts. It's been quite a few years since I last made any videos regarding puzzles, and actually I've been out of the community for quite a while, actually. I looked back and noticed that the last time I'd made a video about this, the Master Tetrahedron or Master Pyraminx was back in February 2009, which makes it just about 6 years since I've done anything, or 7 years since I've done anything involving the puzzle community. So I thought I'd go back and revisit one of my favorite puzzles that I hand built back in the days, back in 2008, 2009, which was the Master Pyraminx. As you all know, this is a standard Pyraminx puzzle. It's been around for many decades now, since probably designed back in the late 70s and produced in the early 80s during the Rubik's Cube craze. And I believe the credit goes to Mr. Meffert, who resides in Hong Kong. And if you don't know who that is, then you really don't care about puzzles. However, we're here to discuss the Master Pyraminx. The original design for this, I believe, the first time we saw it, I think initially the community first saw this puzzle as it was built by Mr. Katsuhiko Okamoto from Japan back in 2002 or 2004. His puzzle was approximately, almost exactly actually, the size of this particular puzzle, but of course with the higher order, just like this one. It turns out, of course, that he was not the original. He was not the first person to come up with this particular puzzle. It was credit actually goes to somebody in Russia whose name escapes me at the moment. But that particular design actually had some design flaws because of the way it was built. And the reason it never was very good was because I think initially the problem was the issue with the full piece overlap. When the lowest layers overlap, the feet down here completely come off the edge of what you would expect the puzzle to be. So I think the design problem was, how do you keep this hanging on? Trivial tip. We're not going to worry about the trivial tips, actually. So anyway, so the way to get around this, of course, is to build a full-size foot. And as you can see, if you build it just right, it's quite stable and strong. Doesn't come off. That's how I ended up building my puzzle. So anyway, this particular puzzle, I had discussed this with Jason Smith back in the day, and one of the ideas they came up with was using a skewb diamond as the basis of this puzzle, which if you look very, very closely, you can see the rounded parts of that skewb diamond here. You can see, again, you can see the skewb diamond, which forms the basis of the puzzle. So at the time I started working on one, I managed to ruin a skewb diamond. I was looking for one, but at that time the skewb diamond had been discontinued, and it was very, very difficult to find. I'll be honest, I have no idea if the skewb diamond's been reissued or not, but anyway, back then, who came along to be my rescuer but none other than Aleh, who just happened to have a skewb diamond, and he graciously gave it to me, which I did. I believe I properly compensated him for it later, but again, that's not to be discussed in public. But anyway, the skewb diamond I used to build the puzzle turns out actually that the Okamoto mechanism essentially was built almost entirely the exact same way as this. That's how it turned out to be, but he built it, of course, on a much smaller scale, on a scale that fits into this size. However, again, since I don't have access to his fascinating machine shop, I decided that the skewb diamond was going to be the basis of my puzzle. Now, so how did I go about building this? And I said this was a handmade puzzle. This particular one, it's not entirely true that it's handmade. The reason it's not entirely handmade is because initially what I did was, let me bust out one of my examples. This is the basis of the skewb diamond. Let me go and open this thing up. You can see here, basically, this is one of the removable pieces of a skewb. Let's see. The skewb mechanism. If you're familiar with this particular mechanism, these pieces on the skewb diamond are nothing but extensions of these flat pieces that come out of the skewb, as you can see here, right? So all I did was I just took the existing skewb diamond extension pieces, removed them, and basically cut holes around them, or rather cut hollows into them in a big circle, because again, if you imagine I can rotate this carefully here. If you imagine a skewb diamond being like this, you're basically cutting a big hole on the top. And I did this on 4 of the faces, and then by doing so, I then added some plastic sheet to it to give it some degree of depth. And I added this depth to make sure that the pieces would basically move very, very smoothly around that curvature. Okay, so I did that built it up like this, cut down these pieces and formed them in such a shape. Now, after I had done that, I had to determine, of course, well, how big was that hole going to be? Well, actually, initially, I did not cut the hole and then fit pieces to that hole. What I actually did was I took pieces of a standard Pyraminx. If I could disassemble this one. This is an old Pyraminx. Okay. So what I did was initially, again, if you add the extra layer to the Pyraminx, of course, the edges completely go off. The edge pieces go completely off the edge. So initially, what I ended up doing was I cut off one of the feet off the Pyraminx there. I cut off one of the sides of the feet and basically extended this. So how did I extend it? Well, I'll show you one of the prototypes actually from way back in the day. Let me see if I can find a good one. Here we go. Yeah, this is it. Okay, so this is the actual piece I had created by hand way back in the day. And as you can see here, again, depending on the lighting, maybe it's not so clear, but basically all I did was take some plastic sheet and added it to an existing piece, basically making it larger. And again, the reason I made it larger was because the pieces had to match the size of the skewb diamond's triangular faces. And that's why I ended up building it up. If the skewb diamond had been a fraction smaller, I could have just reused the pieces of the Pyraminx. However, that was not the case. Anyway, after cutting off one of the feet flat, what I ended up doing was I just took some plastic sheet and basically very, very carefully, again, it might be difficult to see, but I added basically some additional plastic sheets and basically bent them very carefully around the curvature of this. So I added plastic sheets to that in order to build up that in there. All right. So I built that up so that, so that it would properly be a large enough of a piece to where it would be nice and stable against this. And again, you can see once it was properly built for diameter, then I ended up determining a little bit of trial and error, but I determined that if I just use a couple of sheets of plastic in here, the amount that I would need to make the foot, extend the foot, would be based on how much plastic I used. And as it turned out, luckily for me, the skewb diamond back in the day, this particular one, I don't know how new production ones are now, if they use the exact same molds or not. I don't know how consistent they are, but back in those days, these were extremely consistent, and you could really count on this being a very, very even thickness from piece to piece. So basically, adding plastic sheet, I determined how long the foot had to be this way, extended the foot, adding the plastic sheets, again, bandaging on top of the existing curvature, I determined how big I wanted to make the hole, and then I just added a foot to it so that the piece can't come out. Okay? So you can see that the piece won't come out, won't just pop out, but again, you want to make sure that the piece flows smoothly. So again, this takes a lot of painstaking shaving carefully, a little at a time. You don't want to start too much, because if you start making it too much and sloppy, it's never going to be a very nice, smooth fit. So then after making this piece, I actually made several different attempts, and I can demonstrate here that all of them actually turned out very, very well. Again, if you're just very, very patient with your with your building up of pieces, you can get very, very good results that are nice and smooth. You know, you can see all the pieces fit nice and smooth. All right. So after doing this, after making several of these, I realized, well, unfortunately the plastic I used was white and the skewb diamond, of course, is black. And I thought, well, I could either dye these or I can make these all over again using black plastic sheet. But at the time I only had a white Pyraminx available. Anyway, long story short, I ended up casting several pieces, which here's a couple of rejected ones. But this is essentially what these pieces are, is just basically a two-part polyurethane plastic that's been cast. After casting, you know, just casted several pieces to make up the Pyraminx. You can see even these rejects still flow very, very smoothly across the faces. And again, there's nothing, no secret tricks about how to make these things. This one's a little bit tight, but again, this is where it comes in. You want to make it nice and tight. You want to start it tight, and then afterwards, you do tiny little amounts of work to make the piece move smoothly across the surface. If you start loose to begin with, then it will never be nice and smooth and nice as an end result. Okay? So anyway, prototypes. I filled in all the little gaps on the prototypes here with a little bit of with epoxy putty, and it was either Magic Sculpt or Epoxy Sculpt to fill in all the little blanks in the gaps so that the two-part molds will turn out nicely. You can see a little air bubble there, but anyway, these turned out really, really nice, and I could have used them, but for whatever reason I decided the other pieces were better, or maybe they were just extras. Frankly, I don't remember. It's been, 7 years. So anyway, after that, the only other trick was to basically build up the remainder of the puzzle so that, let's piece it up. Building up the remainder of the puzzle so that the lengths of the axes connect to they connect to this larger piece, again, which on the Pyraminx is this piece here, the central, I don't know what you would call it, the octahedral piece that is a part of that rotates about the axis. Now, same thing with these. These are not cast pieces. These are just the existing pieces that I built up using sheets of black plastic. And if you look very carefully, you can see the little rough hole there where the original hole exists. Now, what I ended up doing was, so that it would still retain some of that nice clickiness, I actually retained the hole, the original hole that's here for the clicking ball bearings, retained it and used a tiny little piece of plastic sheet that I punched a hole in and very, very carefully shaped so that just enough of the ball bearing would stick out, and it capped the hole, again, thus retaining that nice clicky feel to it. And I'm glad I did. I mean, it looks a little rough when you actually look at it, but, it is a handmade puzzle, so I'm not too particularly worried about it. I'm not worried about being criticized about my lousy puzzle-making skills. Not that they're that great. I've seen some of the works out there nowadays, and frankly, I'm pretty amazed and pretty blown away. Anyway, as you can see, the axis here, the basic, what is it? The equivalent of the stationary axis pieces had to be modified so that it can rotate freely as a layer. You can see it's been rounded, and it's been rounded to a degree that, again, it does not interfere with where these pieces, the tongue and groove pieces, slot into the puzzle. So by doing this way, you can make, as long as this rotates free, you can then take your existing pieces and just kind of stick them in like so. Okay, so once you've done that, then all you do is just a lot of filing, sanding, and smoothing to make sure it's nice and slick, fluid. So that's all it was. Now, after 7 years, you know, why bother making it, or 6 years? Why bother making this video? I said, you know what? It's been long enough. It's not like there's any real secrets left in puzzle making. The advent of 3D printing, you can pretty much make anything in your crazy imagination. I've seen some of that stuff out there. I'm just completely blown away that people can design these things. Whereas I'm kind of stuck in the Stone Ages, if I can even put this thing back together. You would think I would have had a lot of practice. So anyway, now that it's been reassembled, you can see the tops don't click. They just flow smoothly. But I like to think that I did a pretty decent job getting these things really, really smooth. You know, sure, the puzzle is squishy. It's because the skewb diamond underneath is quite squishy. Right? It's quite a squishy puzzle, but because it is a skewb underneath it, it is relatively forgiving of even a little bit of misalignment. You can see I'm not really much paying attention to how well it's aligned. Not paying attention to how it's aligned. I'm just moving pieces randomly. The tops, I did retain the clickiness again. How did I do that? Because again, it's still a Pyraminx underneath, so you can see the little ball bearings there. So the tips have a nice positive click to them. And those two I just built up using sheets of plastic. If you look very carefully, you can see it's just built up. So these have been built up. The tips were built up. The center axes pieces were also built up. The edge pieces were built up. And then I made some molds out of these things and cast several pieces. Modified a skewb diamond underneath in this sort of fashion. Modified that skewb diamond and then slapped it all together. Did a little bit of refining, a little bit of sanding, a little bit of tweaking, and what you see here is this puzzle now being somewhat abused. See, this has a nice click to it. And it kind of locks into place. These top pieces don't, but again, I didn't want to go through the trouble of trying to make clicking points for these, but whatever, I don't care. So anyway, that's about it. I figured after all these years, might as well share what exactly it took to put together this puzzle. And hopefully maybe inspire some of you to try a little bit of handcrafting yourself. I know that 3D printing is all the rage these days, although with Shapeways raising their prices, I don't know how that really affects people's ability to make design and sell puzzles. I don't think it will in the long run. I think it's just something that people just have to deal with. Eventually people will just be making their own, will be buying their own 3D printers anyway. But anyway, that's it. That's the rundown of my Master Pyraminx. If you want to see another video of it, of course, I have my older one from 6 years ago. But I figured at least now, finally, I could say something about it. Maybe show off a few pieces in high definition for your education, for your enjoyment, whatever you want to do with it. All right. Happy puzzling.